In this video, I want to show how to install, configure, set up, and secure Metricbeat so that it can be used with Elasticsearch and Kibana version 8. Metricbeat is a very useful tool for monitoring server metrics like CPU usage, memory usage, disk usage, and quite a few other things. In fact, on my screen right now is one of the many dashboards that Metricbeat offers for you to stay informed on the resource usage of all your servers. There will be a part 2 to this video where I will focus on configuring email alerts and notifications on top of Metricbeat and Kibana. But for this video, I just want to stay focused on the fundamentals of Metricbeat. So this video assumes you already have Elastic and Kibana installed. If you haven't done that yet, I will leave a link in the description to a video that shows you how to do the Elastic and Kibana installation. You'll also need a server that you want to monitor. So I have a new Ubuntu 20.04 server here with 500 megabytes of memory, and I intend to install Metricbeat to this server. So with that said, let's actually just get started. This terminal window is pointing to my new Ubuntu 20.04 server, and I'm going to install Metricbeat to it so that I can monitor its performance. For installation, you can find the instructions for installing Metricbeat here on the Elastic website. Basically, I'm just going to copy this command, this command, this command, this command. Oh, sorry. 1, 2, and 3. These 3 commands. And this command here, I'll just put it all into a script. Like that. Yep, just add the repositories, download a dependency, do an update, and then install Metricbeat. So I'll go ahead and let this thing run. All right, I'll pause until this is finished. All right, so the installation is done pretty quick, and now we're ready to start configuring Metricbeat before enabling it. So we'll go to the etc directory, the newly created Metricbeat directory, and in here you're going to find some configuration files that came with Metricbeat, and we're going to edit the main configuration file here, metricbeat.yaml. First option we'll change is this one, reload enabled. We'll say true so that anytime we restart Metricbeat, the new configuration options will be respected. And let's scroll down. A lot of these options we can leave the way they are. Oh, this one. We'll actually want to enable dashboards. So what this does is, if we go to our Kibana instance that we have already installed, if you click to this option, Analytics Dashboard, you'll see that initially there's no dashboards here already. You can start creating your own and your own visualizations. But because it's a brand new instance of the Kibana Elastic Stack, there's no data visualizations already in here. By enabling this option, set up dashboards enabled, later during our Metricbeat setup, Metricbeat will preload the Elastic Stack or Kibana with some boiler template dashboards and visualizations that we will find very useful. So we'll go to that. We'll show that in a moment. And the other thing we need to do is let's make sure Metricbeat is aware of the location of our Kibana instance. All right. So this this is HTTPS. And this URL is effectively this top level domain over here that we see. The other thing we need to do is point to our Elasticsearch instance. Right, so that's the URL to my Elastic server. And we are using HTTPS. And to connect to Elastic, I'm going to use the actual super user that I have installed, that I set up when setting up my installation of Elastic. these are the credentials that I actually use to log into this Elastic platform. Because it has super user privileges, it's definitely going to be able to do the Metricbeat setup when pinging the Elastic API. Now, I don't want to use these credentials indefinitely. As soon as I've done the Metricbeat setup, I'm going to swap these credentials out for a less privileged user. So we'll return to this in a moment. Okay. And with that, I think we can pretty much leave all these other settings the way they are. There's a lot of explanation around these extra options in the Elastic documentation. In fact, the Elasticsearch community YouTube channel has a very good explanation of a lot of these different options. I'm just covering some of the more basic fundamental setup. Right? So we've got everything going, and I think we're ready to test the setup. Let's go here. Now there's a new directory here called Metricbeat in the USR share directory. We'll go right into binary directory, and you'll see some of the options that are available to you here, or some of the binaries and executables that are available to you here. When we start up the Metricbeat service, it is effectively this executable over here, right? But it comes with many other options, and one of them is to do a setup. Actually, before we do the setup, we should test our configuration file that we just edited. The configuration file is this one, right? And if you run this, at least on my server, if I run this as it is, I tend to get an error. I have to actually specify where my home directory is. So I'm gonna specify that here. And later on, we're going to create some, let's say, API keys that I want to keep as secrets. So we're going to use let's say, a key store, a protected key store. And to do that, I actually need to specify where I plan to put this. So I'm just going to type this here for now so I remember to consistently type it every single time I run this Metricbeat command, right? So I'm going to store key store values in this directory, and anything else that's data related that Metricbeat needs to store to. So let's test our configuration. And all right, configuration is okay. Let's actually test our connection. And I think, yeah, everything's okay. If you're using self-signed certificates, you might get some yellow warning signs instead. And those should be okay. Those are just as good. Now, this address says 192.168.0.33. This is actually the elastic.everbyte.net. It's the URL to my Elasticsearch server. So I think we're good. Let's actually run the setup now. Let's try this. So it's the same command, but instead of test output, we're going to run setup. And this might take a minute or two. So I'll pause the video while it's running this setup command. And all the dashboards have been loaded. So if we come back over here and let's say we click the dashboards, you can see now we have some boiler template dashboards and data visualizations to select from. And if we say system overview, now there won't be any data because we haven't actually set up our Metricbeat to start publishing data to Kibana Elastic, but you can at least see that this dashboard is set up and ready to receive data, right? Yeah, so there's just nothing here at this point. Actually, seeing some of these errors here, maybe I think I just have to reboot Kibana for a moment because, I may not have enough memory on my Kibana. So give me a moment. I'm going to just add more memory to my server. Sorry about that. Anyway, got it back up. We were seeing errors before because I only had 500 megabytes of memory on my Kibana server. I upped it to 2 gigabytes, and now we can see the empty dashboards the way I would have expected. Now, there's another area here that I should have shown earlier, but I forgot to, is under the observability section. Actually, no, this is exactly what I wanted to show. So under the observability section, you'll see a lot of these widgets saying, hey, install Metricbeat or install FileBeat. And this is what it looks like before we've published any data, Metricbeat data to the Kibana Elastic Stack. But the moment we start publishing data here, we'll also see some dashboards and visualizations here. So in summary, you'll see data visualizations under the Observability tab to monitor the performance of your infrastructure, as well as any of the boiler template dashboards. Oh, this one's already selected. And any of the boiler template dashboards that we have in here. So next, let's start actually publishing metric information from our Ubuntu server to our Kibana system, Kibana Elastic system. And actually before we do that, I mentioned that if I want to publish information from my server to Kibana, I probably do not want to use this super user account. That's just kind of not good security practice. I want to create a less privileged user that we will use on a continual basis to publish metric information to Kibana Elastic. So let's go ahead and create a less privileged user. And you can actually get some of that information here on the Elastic website for Metricbeat. Here you're seeing we can create a role specific to publishing. And just so I should have mentioned it, when doing our initial setup with the super user, we didn't have to use the Elastic super user. We could have set up a specific user with less privilege than a super user to do the initial setup. It will require these privileges, so you'll need to create a role using these privileges instead. Right? But I thought, since it's a one-time thing, I don't mind using a super user, especially since I'm going to be changing my password for my super user later on anyway. That's why I just used my super user. But for an ongoing basis of publishing metric information, I would prefer that to be a less privileged account. So we're going to create a new role and assign these privileges to it. Right? So let's go to here, go to Stack Management, click on roles, and we're going to create a new role. I will call it the Metricbeat user. Right? You can call the role anything you want, something that's meaningful to you. And according to the documentation, we need the monitor privilege, and we need the read ILM to read indexes, I believe. And for the Metricbeat, we want to do the create doc privilege. All right, and I believe that should be that. We'll create this role. And let's see if it actually shows up. Yep, there it is. All right, now we're ready to create a user. Let's go ahead and create a user. I'll just call it like that. Doesn't really matter what email address I use for this demonstration purpose because I don't intend on sending myself emails to this account. For password, I'm going to pick something very easy to remember for now. ABCD1234. But in your situation, you probably want to use more secure passwords. And next, we'll need the Metricbeat user role. And although not mentioned in the Elastic documentation, just through trial and error, I realized I also need the editor role. Without this editor role, Kibana and Elastic seems to complain about these 403 forbidden errors with bulk create on some other indices. So I'm not sure why that is, but if anyone knows why, just let me know in the comments below, and I will do an update to this video. So I'll go ahead and create this user. So we should now have this new metric user, and what we'll do is we're going to generate an API key for this user. So I'm going to go to DevTools, and let me find my code for this. All right, I copied the code from another window, and then I'll just, wait, let me delete this. Or I have to close this and then delete it. There we go. Okay, delete. All right, so what this is going to do is it's going to ping the REST API endpoint with a post method with this information here, the metric user, and this is the password for that I set up for that user. I'll call my API key metric, and if I press play, then I will get the ID and the API key. In fact, I am going to copy this and paste it to a notepad just so I don't remember, just so I don't lose it. All right, so I'm going to need this information. Now, what I can do at this point is I could paste. In fact, I'm going to comment this out so no one finds this information later. In fact, I'll change the super user password later just to be sure. But I could paste the ID, comma, API key in here. So it would be this ID goes in here and the API key goes in here. But I don't want to hard code any secrets into files like these. So I'm going to set up an environment variable. I'll call it ES API key, right? So that, and this API key, I'm going to use the Metricbeat's key store to encrypt the password or the ID and API key to a key store file somewhere else. And then that variable will be loaded into this configuration file during runtime, right? So let's go ahead and create that API key. In fact, I'm going to format it right now first. I'm going to need this piece, comma, the API key, like this. And then we can go back to our USR share Metricbeat, the binary directory, and then actually let me see if I can find our previous, here it is. So this was our setup command, and it's the same thing except we replace setup with key store, add, and the name of our environment variable or the variable that we chose for our configuration file, like that. Hit enter. So normally I should create my key store file first, but because I didn't, Metricbeat is asking me if I want to create it now. So I'll just hit yes, and then I'll paste in my value. I'll paste it in here, hit enter, and that should be it. I believe now our Metricbeat service will actually use this API key instead of the super user's username password. So let's enable, and we can actually run Metricbeat from this command here if we wanted to. We can start Metricbeat like this, right? Or use the systemctl, because systemctl is going to link to this anyway. So I'm going to start up the systemctl. And let's start it. Let's just see if there's anything wrong with the service right now. Good, just infos. And it could take a while before, all right, yep, nothing wrong. Let's actually go to the discover area. All right, so maybe no data has come in yet. The other thing we can check is, after the initial setup, I believe the indices should already have been created. So if we go to stack management, index management, data streams, good. So the indexes are, was already set up from the initial setup command. So now it's just a matter of time, maybe wait a minute or so before data comes into our dashboard or comes into our discover area. All right, let's press refresh again. I will double check here to make sure there are no errors. Yeah, everything's just info or warning. So I'll pause until data shows up. It only took about another minute, but now we can see the data coming in, and now it's gonna come in almost real time. You can filter some of these records by just searching, by adding some conditions here. right? Well, this will just yield the same results because we only have one server set up with Metricbeat. Now, the other interesting thing is if you go to some of the dashboards, the boiler template dashboards, you can see some of the top level information flowing into the system now. And if we go to the observability section, you'll see that the widget asking you to install Metricbeat is no longer here. Instead, it's been replaced by this section with hosts to show that you have the ability to monitor servers now. And this is an alternative view for some of the Metricbeat data, alternative to the dashboards that I showed earlier. Okay, so Metricbeat is already set up for this. Now, what I want to do next is actually set up a second server with exactly the same settings so that we can monitor two servers at the same time. So I'm going to do that next. So this is another Ubuntu server I have installed in my office somewhere, and we'll run through the same Metricbeat installation steps, except we don't need to run the setup. So I'm going to do just another install script, and I will paste this in here, right? Just the same thing that we ran before, and we'll go ahead and run this. Oh, let me... All right, so we'll let this thing go. I'll pause for a moment. Okay, installation successful. Let's go to the Metricbeat directory and let's configure, set up our file. So this is true. Leave all of these the same. This is true. Actually, that could be false. This setup dashboard's enabled because we've already done the setup, so it doesn't really matter. Right. And let's set up our Elastic destination. Using HTTPS, and we're going to use the same API key. You could set up another one just for this server, but we'll keep it the same. And I believe that should be almost there. And what we'll do is run the metric. You know what? Yeah, we need to do the key store. Oops. All right, so I believe that, almost made a mistake. The variable name is, all right, and let's grab it from my notepad over here. Yes, paste in the value, enable Metricbeat. And let's hopefully no issues. Yep, so in a few minutes, we should see a second host name appear here. So I'll pause for a moment. And there we go. So the second server is here. And you can also see it in the dashboard. We go to dashboard. All right, so it appears here as well. So that concludes the fundamentals of Metricbeat. I will be producing a part 2 to Metricbeat where I focus more on email alerts and notification, so stay tuned for that.